Good afternoon, and welcome to the FileMaker Academy's December class. My name is Tim Neudecker with Logic, and I'm here today with John Mathewson, who will be our instructor, and we'd like to present to you building a powerful business solution on a budget. First, the FileMaker Academy is a consortium of 7 leading FileMaker Pro development companies from all around the country, and every month we bring you a free webinar to help increase the world's knowledge of FileMaker Pro. Logic, our presenting company today, was founded in 2002 with the primary office in Westport, Connecticut. We also have an office in Brewster, New York. We are Platinum FileMaker Business Alliance members, and every developer at Logic is certified in FileMaker Pro 12, 11, and 10 as well. And we specialize in process and return on investment databases, both large systems and small systems, and everything in between. A little housekeeping before we start the formal class. If you have any questions during the presentation, whether they are technical questions about the presentation, audio issues, or other things, there is a questions area in your control panel. Please feel free to enter your questions, and we will do our best to answer them as quickly as possible. Also, if you have questions for the instructor, please place them there. After the presentation, we will go through those questions and try to answer as many as we can. And some questions, if we can't answer them directly right now, we will make blog posts on the Logic blog and the FM Academy blog to answer those questions. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to John Mathewson, our instructor today. John?
Thank you, Tim. First of all, welcome everybody, and I'd like to start off today. We're going to be talking about a case study about a company called Bell Point Asset Management, and they're a company that manages accounts for clients, and they have advisors. And what we were asked to do is to put together a system for them, and I'll be reviewing that process today, because the thing we're trying to show is that with the new FileMaker 12, we have a wonderful platform in which we can develop powerful solutions inexpensively. And I think this is the real benefit of many of the new themes, etc., that came out with FileMaker 12. But before I do that, I'd like to just quickly review what is great about FileMaker 12. I think many of us who work with it every day get used to seeing its features, and it's easy for us to forget just how powerful it is as a tool, and I'd like to quickly review that. The first thing is that one of the most important things about any database system is its ability to model data. And the new system that FileMaker came out with in 2004 is absolutely stellar in this area. There is really little, if any, that I've ever come across. You cannot model very effectively. And using some of the new tools that they've added, such as direct SQL queries, etc., we really end up with a very powerful environment where really almost any business solution can be modeled. And one we'll show you today is a good example of that. They've also put in great data security and user rights management, which means that for people who are new to FileMaker and are concerned about their data, all of the tools we need, such as SSL encryption, user rights, and being able to secure the server so that it is not vulnerable, all of those tools are included. We also have great tools to communicate with external systems, such as enterprise corporate systems. We can integrate with the iPad and iPhone through FileMaker Go, so it's probably the most inexpensive way to deploy a real database solution in the field using a tablet or a phone. We can publish to web. We both have instant web publishing, which is straight presentation of FileMaker layouts. We also have PHP support, so we can develop sophisticated web applications that talk directly to FileMaker server. And new in 12, we have integrated document management. I'll show you that today. I mean, right out of the box, that is such a wonderful feature because we can store documents from multiple users in multiple locations and have them stored externally on a central server, which means that they are both secure and robust and also scalable. So if you have a large number of documents, you can manage them effectively. And finally, and something we'll be talking a lot about today, is that we've had the introduction of layout themes which use cascading style sheets and really provide us the ability to do things in a much more rapid way than before. And you'll hear me beat the drum a little bit on this because rapid development is everything as far as we're concerned for a bunch of reasons which we'll get into. When we talk about software with a higher ROI, we're really looking at two things. I mean, return on investment, ROI, means that you've got an investment and you've got returns. And we find that often people underestimate some of the real benefits that come through integrating their information on a database. The investments, I think, are pretty obvious. You have your development costs, which are obviously, if you're using an external developer, there are fees involved. You have, if you're doing it internally, then you're staffing a group of people that are developing your software. You've obviously got the software costs of FileMaker and perhaps FileMaker plugins and add-ons, server, etc. And you've also got the hardware that you might be putting it on, or alternatively, you might be putting it on a cloud instance, and you might be paying for cloud services. But you've also got a very important thing, and ownership of these systems that are developed for companies is very important, and there's a use of human resources in the organization, people who will ultimately be users and experts on the system who have to involve their time to make sure that the system that's developed has the expertise that it's supposed to reflect. So against those fairly considerable investments, we have a bunch of things on the right-hand side, which are the returns. And some of the things that we see routinely, and we find that people who've done these systems really come to appreciate. The first and the obvious one is productivity. People have their information in one place. They can coordinate their efforts in a way, and that improves productivity. A second, less obvious one is timeliness of information. Things can be displayed quickly. They can be propagated in one area and displayed very quickly into other areas, and that really benefits the organization. The third is team alignment. You get everyone working with the same pieces of information. Often we find people are dealing with something, say, like multiple spreadsheets. And so what happens is each version of the spreadsheet is slightly different, and so people are working with slightly uncoordinated information. And when people put in systems like the one we're going to show today, we often see a tremendous improvement in the alignment of the organization. We also see accuracy improving. It's amazing how often we see the first stage of any database deployment starts with people having their data all over the place, and they have to sort of condense it into one area, and then they start working on accuracy and the refinement of the data, and often this is an area of big payoff. And then the secondary and less obvious one is the organizational learning. When we get speed and accuracy and timeliness and all these good things, what happens is organizations have the benefit of learning from their information and spending more time using their information and less time organizing and managing it. When we look at all these things, however, one of the things that we find is that faster is better. Literally, the only area probably in this whole list that isn't improved by doing things more quickly is the software and hardware costs. Those are probably pretty well fixed either way. But if you look at the investment involved, they are lower if you can do things more quickly, both on the human side and the development side. And the returns all improve if you can get the benefits of the application in people's hands more quickly. There's something that I've talked about this at Pause on Error and other places to talk about this whole idea of productivity, and it comes from a lot of work that's done in manufacturing, which is talking about throughput. When the whole just-in-time kind of revolution took place and moved into Six Sigma and other techniques in manufacturing, manufacturers became extremely conscious of just how long things were in their plant for. And in the service area and development, we are a little bit less conscious of that. And we tend to think, well, if a project completes in 12 weeks or 6 weeks, doesn't really matter. Well, the truth is it really matters a lot because most of the costs that are involved in developing software are fixed. Their salaries, their people that are employed, and it's very, very difficult to have something that is strung out and make it as effective and profitable. So if you look at something that takes 12 weeks, you're going to get 4 projects a year. If you can reduce that, like we did in the case that I'll show you in a little bit, to 6 weeks, we can do 8 of those projects a year. And that literally doubles the amount of throughput that is achieved by the same team. So one of the techniques that we use, a lot of people, certainly developers, are aware of this, is called rapid application development. And we like, one of our sister companies, IT Solutions, has been a big proponent of this. It's often called Agile development, sometimes rapid application development. But in both cases, it is a very clearly defined software development technique that allows you to build a very consistent and reliable and high quality applications. And I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about what some of the things that are involved with that. The first and most important thing is really a clear problem definition, and I'll review that in a little bit, give you some examples. The second is that everything that the system has to do is described in terms of features. And again, I'll show you those. And we find the languaging here is extremely important. Frequent customer communication, or if it's internal frequent user communication, is critical. And so what we have adopted in our company, and Agile really promotes this, is to develop everything in short cycles, typically about 2 weeks long, that is both preceded by and ended with a meeting with the customer, where the features that are developed within the cycle are carefully reviewed and checked for quality, consistency, and did they meet the description that is outlined in the feature. In this way, everything builds on quality. In addition, the most important features get developed first and they get deployed. So for example, if a company has a lot of data that needs to be imported from Excel spreadsheets, they get those features deployed as quickly as possible so that they can start that importation process as early as possible. So the first thing we start off here is really the problem statement. And for those of you who are fans of FileMaker, Heather Winkle has been leading the brigade on design. And she has, if you haven't had a chance, for developers who haven't had a chance to see her at the developer conference, her materials are excellent. And what she talks about is that when we do a problem statement, we really need to take 4 things into account. And this is a simple example. We say design what, form, a thing, what is it, for what level of support, and this is the level of automation. Is this highly automated or is this fairly manual? Of what activity and by what people? So it's a kind of abstract, but if we look at it in a tangible example, we could say design a cash-operated machine for quick and easy ticket purchasing by passengers. And this way, you often find that when you're defining your features and you have a clear problem statement in mind, your features will have more purpose, more sense of what automation is required, and more sense of who the final user involved is. So I'd like to turn now to our BellPoint, the Bell, as we call it, the BellPoint portal. It's for the company's name is BellPoint Asset Management. They're a client of ours. And let me tell you a little bit about them. They are investment advisors, which means that they have clients, they have accounts, and they do investments on behalf of their clients. And they have advisors that advise clients and receive commissions, I guess would be the best way to put it, based upon the activities of their accounts for the quarter. So the company receives quarterly updates from the banks, and they've been doing this for years, and they've been doing this using Excel in the past. And they process this information into advisor accounts, which lets the advisor know exactly what commissions they earned against that activity. And a very important activity also is that the company accountant has to reconcile to make sure that the fees that were expected to be received were received, and that the fees that had to go out to the advisors were distributed correctly. The issue that they had was that there was too much information that was being stored in too many different sheets and places, and the process was taking almost half the quarter to implement. And so what they were looking for is a network solution. They wanted for a budget under $15,000, and they wanted the application available in 6 weeks. And I'm pleased to say we were able to achieve those goals. So we started off with what is our problem statement. Our problem statement was design a network database for automated generation of advisor accounts by the company accountant. Pretty straightforward. So we start off and we look at how do we get our information. And our information actually comes, in this case, entirely from Excel. And so it's pretty straightforward as to where our data source is, what types of information we have to work with. We took that and we put that into a simple map that said, okay, of our data, how would we set this out in an application framework that would allow us to manage all the requirements? During this process, we did a careful review of all the features that were required, which I'll talk about in a second, and that led to this basic ER diagram, entity relationship diagram, which basically points out that the 3 in blue are the main activity areas: the accounts, which lets us know what accounts they have, the advisors, the relationship between advisors and accounts, and the expected fees, and then the reconciliation with submitted and received fees. Those are the main activities of this database. So this is how we store our information. This is what we like to think of the nouns of an application. But when we get down to what the application actually does, which is really what users experience, we'd like to think of that more in terms of the verbs. And this is where we get into the language of Agile development. And here I've just given 3 examples of features that are written in the language we use in Agile development. As you can see, each of these features, features 1, 2, and 3, and by the way, a typical system like this might involve 30 or 40 features, just to give a sense. And you'll notice that it says the accountant, who is it, can import Excel accounts transactions received from custodian banks. So we know that we have to be able to import Excel transactions. The accountant can review and correct the imported data before processing it into advisor accounts, so that we need to have that as an interim step. And then we also have a very important alternative language, which that the accountant can expect the system, and this is your automation language, can expect the system to automatically link imported Excel data into existing accounts, advisors, and custodian banks. So by using this kind of language, this is how the entire verbs of the system would be laid out. And that gives a consistent language that can be reviewed in those cycle meetings that I talked about with the client, but also can be used with your developing staff to make sure that they have a clear idea of what the implementation requirements are. If there's lack of clarity during the cycle about any of these particular features, that leads to a dialogue between the customer and the developer to clarify the specific requirements. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to try and cover in today's demo. The first is that we're going to talk about data organization and naming our data in such a way that it promotes automation. And what I mean by that is that we use standardized scripts to save time in development. And I'll show you some techniques that we used that really saved a tremendous amount of time, because instead of having to write a series of repetitive scripts, we were able to use a few centralized scripts that performed some fairly key activities and did so in a highly automated way. We also will talk about using themes and the new layout tools that come with FileMaker 12, and importantly, we're looking at these from the standpoint of getting things deployed quickly. We'll talk about importing, and I'll show importing some Excel data. I'll show some reports being output, and I'll also show some document management. So let's turn to the demo. So hopefully everyone can see that. This is now, we've moved over to FileMaker Pro, and this is FileMaker Pro 12, and this is actually the launch screen that would come up when you launch the application. As you can see up here, we have our menuing system, which is very straightforward and is consistent on every layout. And we also have an indicator showing us whereabouts we are in the application. You can see that we have 2 things that change, which is generally considered a good design idea when something is highlighted. So it's both underlined and the color has changed. And when we double-click or click alternatively on any one of these, it switches between the view that is a form-based view and the view that is a list-based view. So this allows us to find our data very quickly, we can navigate into our data very easily, and we can move between these various views of the world. I indicated that advisors was very important, and we'll get into this as an example of an advisor's view of the world. We have accounts where we can view all the activity against any particular account. We can also see all the different accounts and navigate to any one of them, use our find tools to find specific accounts that we're looking for. And we have our expected fees, which is really where all the reconciliation process gets done to look at the information that is imported from Excel and organized in such a way that they can do their quarterly distributions. Interestingly, this application allows them to do in 2 days what used to take them the better part of a month and a half. So you see there's a tremendous improvement in productivity because they have the system that links all this information together in a very active way. It also has allowed them to clean up their information in such a way that they've been able to address things like account imbalances and other issues that they might have. So all of the, as I say, all of the parts of the application are here. What I'd like to do is quickly show you the underlying data structure. Got a little bit techie here for a second. One of the things that we do is we use a very strict naming convention. And how that works is that you'll see if I scale out a little bit here, you'll see that these are each organized into, for those of developers will say, well, of course, this is anchor buoy, which is the preferred technique for organizing FileMaker data. It's not the only technique, but it's certainly one of the preferred ones. And what we have here is abbreviations that represent every single table that is in the system. And how we've organized it is that we have each naming of our table occurrences, which is basically our representations of the information, is preceded by the name of the grouping that it is part of, and each one of these groupings has a unique name. After that is a listing of the tables involved. So FEX is actually, if I come down here into my legend, FEX is my expected fees, which is really the hub of this whole application. And so each of the files that link up with FEX all have FEX in the first position, and each one of these shows the specific listing of the files, the file occurrences or the table occurrences that are here. We also use special naming that if something is non-standard, in other words, it has a non-traditional parent-child relationship, that we have a description that is added telling us why. And often this is for special purpose things such as managing an import process or other things like that. So because the entire database is laid out in this manner, everything is very simple, it's very organized, and most importantly, the way it's organized is 100% consistent in the layout, and therefore we can do things like automating scripts so that we have scripts that can handle multiple table occurrences, multiple data instances without having to be customized for each one. I'm going to discard all my changes. So, so when we come in here, so all of these table occurrences, and I showed you each of those table occurrences, each one of these layouts is based on one of those table occurrences, and that's how we are able to represent in each one the information that's involved and reflects all the different linkages that are required to show the information. The next thing I wanted to show you is how we got the layouts to be very consistent. And this is, I very much have appreciated the new endeavors that FileMaker has gone to show people how to design layouts that are both simple and also highly consistent. There's a lot of research out there that indicates that when an application has a simple, consistent design, the usability goes up tremendously. One of the biggest challenges in any new system is making sure that users appreciate it, value it, and use it. And if your design is optimized, that process is greatly improved. So the entire application is like that. Every layout has the same look. Everything has the same. If you notice, things don't jump all over the place when you change from layout to layout. We also have it that it remembers the last view we were on. So if we're, for example, in submitted fees and we're in list view, we go to expected fees, we come back to submitted fees, and we're still in list view. If we were, for example, in form view, we go to expected fees. We're in expected fees, we go back, and it's still in form view. So some very fundamental things are taking place in an automated way. So how do we get our layouts to be consistent and our behaviors to be consistent? I'm not going to go in great detail here, but I'm going to show you some of the new tools that are available in FileMaker that really are great for making your layouts consistent. And for those of you who have seen Heather's work, you know that she is a proponent of this column design, and this is a grid design concept that comes from a lot of web development. And what it does is it says when you're designing your layout and you scale it, and by the way, we have a little scaling tool, which is really hard to see, but it allows me to set a border to all of my layouts so that I know exactly what size to design to. It allows me to set up a series of columns that are actually evenly spaced. And the idea is that the columns provide the channels between text on the left and your data on the right. And by setting these things up in a consistent manner, you can set both vertically and horizontally to have highly consistent layout designs. Some of the nice things about these is that if you right-click on them, you have some controls such as whether you want to share the guide with all layouts or whether it's just for the layout you're seeing, whether you want to lock the guide, meaning it can't be moved, and it also gives you the power to remove the guide. So the idea is early in the process, you use some of the kind of cool tools that exist, one of which is your grid. And I was just going to show you this quickly. If you see, I've set a grid on a snap to here, and this allows us to set up our our columns based on a fundamental grid basis. I'm not going to go into this in great detail. I did present on this back in April. For those of you, if you want to go to the FileMaker Academy site, there is a guide to really takes you through the details of how to set this all up for those of you who think that might be useful. And then at that point, once you've created this column guides, what you do is you pull these guides out from the side, and it allows you to set them, and then we use those as tools to show on our different layouts and get things consistent. So when I move to my, I'm in layout mode here, so I'll go here to say our form. And when you see this, you'll see that we now have these are available here, and you'll see things like right-hand menus and all this sort of stuff all becomes now something that we can use as a planning tool to snap to and to make sure that our layouts stay consistent so that when we move from layout to layout, we don't see that jumping around. And we're also not spending a ton of time doing this. We're using layout themes, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. So if you come in here, what we have now in FileMaker is the ability to select different types of themes. And I'm going to just quickly show you the differences. So this is our expected fee form, and it's in the using the warm blue, but I can also do it in a gray. I prefer the blue personally, but this gives us the ability to change the entire theme, and importantly, all the behaviors. I didn't spend a lot of time setting this up, as you can see, but all the behaviors come with it. So when we go to any type of theme, we get all sorts of really out-of-the-box great behaviors, such as rollovers, the ability to highlight and show people that they're on a button. All this stuff comes right out of the theme, and it's not something we have to spend a lot of time customizing. Similarly, we can the text handling within tabs, etc., also become automated. So, for instance, text that's outside the tab is sort of brownish, and text that's inside the tab is blue. So it allows you to see things automatically. And this required absolutely no programming or special tweaking to set all this stuff up. It's just using the standard theme. And this gets to this rapid application development idea that is so important. So the other thing that I want to show you is in here is standardizing our scripts. The real benefit, I just actually got ahead of myself, but the real benefit is if you look at the layout name here, you'll see that the layout is named based upon the table occurrence that it's based on. So in this case, we're on expected fees, and you'll remember from before that's FEX, and we've put a double underscore and called it a form. When I switch over to the list view, it's FEX list. If I go to advisors, it's ADV form. If I go to the list, it's ADV. So it's very repetitive, not particularly grand, except that repetition allows us to do what I was about to show you, which is we have a very simple go to layout script, which is about this long, and all we have to do to add a new form to the script is basically define right here in these little variables right here what the table occurrence is, and tell it whether does it have a form. If we say yes, we add the table occurrence here to this little description, and we're good to go. That's all we have to do, and a new form has been added to the application. The navigation will automatically manage that for us. Nothing else to do. Has a list view. We add it in here, and it has a list view. If we don't have a list view, double-clicking on the menu selection will not take you to a place that doesn't exist. It automatically knows that there is no list view, and therefore doesn't try and take you there. And similarly with table. So, and this in principle could be extended tremendously. And then everything that we do within this navigation gets recorded in a list of global variables. And so what's really cool is it builds all these things on the fly, builds them automatically. And so all of our navigation is built dynamically, and it's also built all within this one very simple script. Similarly, the sort script is exactly the same way. We have one sort script. We tell it what sort column we are wanting to select, and I'll show you how that works in a second. We tell them if we automatically want it to be ascending, and we tell them what table occurrence. Now you notice that in our naming here we have this in curly braces, if you can see that. And what that means is these things are all optional. So if we leave any of them out, it'll automatically calculate them based on the current layout. And then it simply goes down and it calls the appropriate sort script. And I think a lot of people have seen this, where it manages all the ascending, descending, all those sorts of behaviors get managed automatically, and then it selects the particular columns that are available for that particular table occurrence and automatically sorts it and records that, how it sorted it in those globals that I showed you a few minutes ago. So by adding these, and of course these can be copied from one application to the next, you end up with a tremendously sped up development process because you're not trying to custom do a lot of this work. This takes a matter of hours instead of a matter of, you know, like a whole day and that sort of stuff. So some of the behaviors that we get out of the bag with this is you can see that not only do these things reflect the behavior, so that as I roll over it shows the color, but also as I select it, it shows me that I have selected it, and if it's underlined, it means it's in ascending order, and if it's not underlined, it means it's in descending order. So all of this behavior comes right out of the bag just using the themes, a little bit of custom formatting, and those two sets of standardized scripts that we can copy from one application to the other. So it ends up by being quite an easy way for us to go into any one of these particular areas and, based on our design work and our features, flesh out the features that are required to make the system have the type of behavior that we know we need. So I'd like to show you a little bit about the behavior of the system, because I think we mentioned that this all starts with importing of our information. And so I'd like to come in, and I'll just take one of these, doesn't really matter which, and I'll look at it, and you'll notice that in here it shows us what our expected fee was supposed to be. If we look down here, we see that, you know, it's reconciled. It came in from Schwab. It's got an expected fee of 126 bucks. There were no adjustments. The net is 126.13. We submitted the fees, and there's no balance, but there is no received fee for this particular one. So this is currently showing an imbalance of no received fee. One of the reasons that we are without our received fees is because I have not imported those yet. And each one of these areas all have exactly the same thing. And these reflect the three different stages of the business. We can come in here and set this up by importing our initial information from, in this case, the services Morningstar. We then can build up our basic information. We then can import all of our submitted fees. These are fees that we've submitted for payment to the bank. And then we can also reconcile our received fees. And I was going to show you how easy it is for them to do this now. So if I want to go in and I want to import fees, I'm working with 12Q3, which is Q3 for 2012, which is obviously already passed, but this is all the data I'm showing you today is just is sample data. And I go OK. And then I got my received fees demo, which is the information that was exported from the Morningstar service. And I open it. And it says import complete. And now I go to receive fees, and I come in here, and all of the internal matching that was required to link it up with all the different areas of the system is all automatically handled. And it also gives us a status showing us that it's all matched. And I can come over here to my submenu, which is, again, very consistent. Every layout has submenus right here. I can show my matched, which is all here. I can show any that came in and unmatched. And in fact, I do have one that appears to have something wrong with it, which is actually a little bit older. But if there were other ones that were missing, so for instance, an account has not been set up correctly, or there's some sort of mismatch between the bank information and our information, I'll get a list of these. And so if I'm the accountant, I can quickly work with all this stuff to reconcile it, come in here, correct any information that is off. And ultimately, I get back into my my expected fee, where really the reconciliation process takes place. And you can now see that because I imported all this information, it now is in balance. There's no imbalance in the system. So you really see that there's some tremendous ability here to really severely shorten the amount of time taken to process this information. So once we have everything in balance, then we go in and we can create transactions for the different advisors that are involved. And one of the reasons why we have this information is because often accounts will be shared. A particular example I have here, it is one advisor on the account, but in many cases for a particular fee, there may be a sharing situation going on, and so that has to be calculated. In addition to which, we may have a split that takes place between what the firm gets as a payout and an advisor. So you can see here, if I come into my one transaction, I can see that it's the advisor is Courtney Shiseido. The net fee is $126.13. The account shares 100% because she's the only person on the account. The split to the advisor is 60%. The firm payout is this, and the advisor payout is that. This is all calculated automatically by the system. And remember, we talked about level of automation. So if I have to reconcile all this, I can come in here and I can find the whole bit and go through. I can also look at the payments, and so we have a payment of $25.23. I can come in here, list out when the payment is made, what the date was, and what the check number was. So again, we get this whole ability to manage, and this used to take them forever because it was difficult for them to link all this information together. Obviously, they're highly expert people, so they knew how to do all this. What they were missing was the tool that allowed them to do it. There's also some cool things, for instance, that we learned through our development in our features, is that we have to be able to lock things after the fact, so that if we, for example, did a new import, we wouldn't mess up the work that we had done prior to that. We also have automated tools like take everything that's been reconciled and go ahead and lock it. So there's automation. And most of these scripts are just a couple of lines long. They're not very difficult to write at all, but they're really very powerful. And again, they come out of having a really clear idea that comes from writing those features that we talked about earlier. Then the hub of this whole system, so once we've imported all the stuff, we reconcile it, and we've created the transactions, we come over here to the advisors, and I just will select a sample. And here is all of those transactions organized for that individual advisor. And we can scroll through the different advisors, and you'll see that each one of them, and we can look at any quarter. We can look at past, we can look at current, we can look at future, which would be empty, of course, but we could look at different quarters for this year, for example. And so this is actually what shows us, and it shows us whether it's reconciled. There's a lot of different codes, etc., that can be used. They can also manage the approval process and the distribution process. And again, every one of these transactions, which we looked at a few minutes ago, can be individually edited. So if there's any particular circumstances, they can handle that. And then the real power is that we can then come in and we can say, okay, now show the advisor summary. And this is what, as I say, they now get in a couple of days. It used to take them weeks. And we can see the whole total. We can see the advisor payout. We can see that everything's in balance, at least within a penny. And we can see the amount that is approved so far for payout to that advisor. And what's really cool, and this is the new feature in FileMaker 12, is that we can now store this as a PDF. And one of the things that we all know about databases is that they tend to change over time. And so it's really great to be able to store things. And then we have a document viewer, which is built right in. And not only can we view the document and we can print the document and do anything else we want, this is basically a PDF, but we also can put it into editable mode so that if we want to see more than just the first page, we tend to like to do it that it first pops the first page, but you have the choice of popping the rest of the pages should you want to, because it's a little quicker that way. And we can actually come in here and we can scroll through each of the pages and see exactly the same information. And the nice thing is that that's all stored safely on a server, and you can also encrypt these documents so that if they contain sensitive information, they're not at risk. So I think what I've tried to show you here, that this system, which literally did take 6 weeks and came in right around 15,000 to develop, really has solved a very substantial and fundamental problem for the company. And it's done it in such a way that they have the ability in a matter of days to do what used to take a matter of weeks, or actually multiple weeks. And it also allows them to get their information more accurate. Over time, the account information, for example, has been made more accurate. And so reconciling the entire process is both quicker and much more accurate than they used to have to do. Go back to our keynote here. And so let me just talk about a few conclusions here. I hope I've showed, I did it fairly quickly, but I hope I've showed that FileMaker really allows us to deploy very meaningful solutions, and using the new tools, we can do it on quite a limited budget. This is a pretty extensive system. It handles importing, exporting, printing, document storage, It's got financial reconciliations. It gets into a lot of very detailed work, and yet was able to be deployed for what would be a fraction of an annual salary of a person, for example. Systems like this can really improve accuracy, timeliness, and productivity with relatively low development. And as someone who's done lots of coding on lots of different platforms, there is nothing that comes close. Excel is probably the closest, but Excel has a lot of limitations in terms of multi-user and a whole bunch of other networking and other benefits of a database, and that allows you to do this kind of thing on this kind of a budget. And so for those of you who are new to FileMaker, it really is quite a unique product and very, very powerful. Key to getting it right is accurate specifications. That feature writing process has been a godsend for us. We thank our friends at IT Solutions every day for that, teaching us how to do that, and then having us practice that and get good at writing those features has been really beneficial for making sure that exactly what is needed by the client is what is being developed by the developer. Frequent feedback is everything. Working with the customer so that the customer has frequent input, that experts, as you can imagine, there was a lot of expertise involved in this system, so there were regular meetings with the company accountant who guided the feature development as we went through, is extremely important. Standardization such as that naming convention, and by the way, if you go to our blog, which is under community on our website, keologic.com, I have provided sample files that you can download that show the naming convention and talk a little bit about how the navigation and other benefits that come out of that are implemented. So standardization really helps us, and most importantly is to remember that rapid deployment, and something that I think that every company should measure, is how long does it take to deploy these systems, because fast is good for everybody. It's good for the developer, and it's also good for the end company, the client. Anyways, that is what I have to say today, and I'll pass you back to Tim. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, John. What I'd like to do now is ask folks, if you have questions, go ahead and submit them to the questions area. I have a little bit of housekeeping I'll do while you are submitting your questions, and then we will ask John all of your questions if possible, if we have the time. Our next class, whoops.
Sorry.
Yep, there we go. Our next class will be on February 1st, and it is titled, You're Using a Spreadsheet to Do That, and it will be presented by Anvil Data Works out of Baltimore, and that should be a great presentation. I think I've seen some of that one before, and it's very good. So on to the questions. Our first question is a refresher. Somebody would like to know, what was the total budget and real-world time to build the solution you demoed today?
The budget was $15,000. We used our standard rate. We came in, including some training, as I recall, about 14.6 or something like that. It was right kind of on spec. We had 6 weeks to deploy this because they had 6 weeks before the next quarter. I will say that there were a few things that were done after the first deployment, but the vast majority of what you saw today was done in that 6-week period. And so they were able, within 6 weeks, to have the system up and running, to import the Morningstar information and do the distribution. I would say the first time we used the system, it took more like a week or so, because frankly, most of the issues were data, just clearing up the data. After that, though, right now it's taking, probably could do it in a day, and it just doesn't take that long.
Great. Many folks have asked if the system you've demoed today will be available for download so people can tear it apart and look at what you've done, and also your slides, will they be available?
Slides, yes. System, no. This is a client's proprietary system, so unfortunately I can't do that. What I have done is I've created an anchor buoy system that shows the naming convention, and that is available for download. And yes, I have saved we'll update, because there are actually some somewhat earlier slides that I created that go through all of the slides and are available.
I would also like to add to your answer, John, all of the presentations for FileMaker Academy are available on YouTube, usually within 3 days of the live presentation. So if you missed anything in today's presentation, go to YouTube and look for the FileMaker Academy, FM Academy channel, and you will find all of the presentations that we've ever done with FileMaker Academy over the years. The next question I have is, can you or will the demo files contain the navigation script you demoed, or could you, I guess, make a separate demo file for just the navigation technique you're using?
Yes, I think I can do that. I would probably have to break it out a little bit because the one I showed obviously is specific to this application. But I think we could show a scaled down version of that. We'd be happy to share that.
Okay. Let me just go through the questions here. Okay, I have two questions here that are going to ask you to go back to your demo file.
Okay.
So give me 1 second here to get these organized. Sorry about the delay, folks. A lot of windows to manage here. Okay, one user would like to get another look at the relationship graph legend, and can you demo how you made that and how you labeled your TOGs and your naming convention on TOGs?
Certainly, and I'm a huge fan of, I did not come up with this method. It was taught to me by one of our developers who had read about it. And I think people have different approaches slightly, but let me explain the way I use, and I find it to be enormously valuable. I've used it for many years. First of all, of course, you get your tables. Now, some of the tables in here are no longer used, and that is a result of the fact that this project originally started with the customer trying to program this. So they came to us for assistance, and we have not yet done the cleanup to take out some of those earlier tables that are not used. But essentially, all of the tables that we talked about and showed in that ER diagram would be listed here. And then you come over here, and how these are organized is in the specific layouts that are used, and that's what the blue indicates. The blue tells us that this is the expected fee. So everything you saw related to expected fees on that layout that I went to so many times today, all of the data that you see there is represented in this table occurrence group here. So everyone that has a basis that is in your layouts, whether they be list or form views, so this is accounts, ACC, this is advisors, ADV, this is documents. You can see documents doesn't have much related to it. This is some of the interrelated stuff, so I didn't actually show this, but this is more kind of housekeeping kinds of files. But you'll see every single one of these has a kind of a home base, and then it has its child table occurrences. And for those of you who are new to FileMaker, a single table that we show here can be represented many times in the table occurrence graph. And the way you can see what table is involved is by rolling over the little arrow in the left-hand side. So for example, here you'll see this is expected fees. Over here you'll see this is submitted fees. Over here you'll see it's advisor transactions. All of these, and so the naming convention is first the name of the table occurrence. They all have the same one. Then is the listing of tables. So the relationship here starts with expected fees. It then moves to advisor transactions. So you see it goes, the first is the table occurrence, the second is the originating table, and the third is the specific table we're on. And this way, can I just...
I'm sorry, I have two very specific questions about this. If you can pause right there. Can you show how you placed your note with the legend and your comments on the relationship graph? We have several people asking how you do that.
No problem. If you go to the A legend down here, you can put a note on, and you can also specify the color. So if you just wanted to see how I did it, it'd be legend, and I come in here, and then I just type it in.
Okay. And also, if you can demonstrate how you change the colors of the table occurrences, the green, the red, the blue.
Okay. And importantly, sorry I didn't complete that thought, but blue is your base table. Red means that we have cascading delete turned on, which we don't get into, but that means if I delete one of these is going to go. So this is to tell us where to delete.
Can you show how you actually change that color?
Yeah, I'm about to. And then green means that I'm a child table. The way you actually set it is to come into here. And I use a palette of other colors, but you can use the standard colors. And we just simply select the table, and you can also do it by group. You can do groupings of them. And you can select it and set the color. And then coming over here, you can do the same thing for your legend. So the legend is nothing more than a note. And
Okay.
but it's
We have
very
one more quick question going back to the price. You quoted a price around $15,000 to develop this demonstration system that you did. One, how many developers worked on this and what was their actual time to work on that, I guess developer time? And also, did the quoted $15,000 price include the cost of the FileMaker server software, hardware, and client server software?
okay. Great questions. First of all, one person worked on the whole system. There was a little cleanup done at the end by some other people and also some quality assurance testing, but the coding was all done by one person. In terms of the hours, I don't know. We have our standard rates, and we simply, in other words, there was no discounting or anything like that that went on. It was simply straight hourly rates, and that was the budget. And so I don't know how many hours it translates to, but it was, you know, I could do some quick math to give you a rough idea. Let me see here. And then the other piece of the puzzle was that they already owned the system, so there was no development cost involved of buying FileMaker server or anything like that. They already owned all that before.
Great, great. We have.
I would say this was about 90 hours of development, something in that range.
Okay, we have two more questions. The first one is for the FileMaker themes and the layouts that you're using from FileMaker 12. Are there themes that translate for web development? I assume for the instant web publishing or the custom web publishing. Those weren't mentioned in the question, but I'm making the assumption that's what he's talking about. So I was wondering if you could show this theme in a web format, maybe.
Okay, in the instant web publishing, which is the one that really uses the FileMaker layouts, there's only one that you can use. There's a number of different themes that come with it, and the only one that works is the classic, which is basically if you have a FileMaker 1110 and you've imported it, that is the classic theme, and it essentially replicates the old style of layout that was used prior to FileMaker 12. All of the other ones come with behaviors and much more sophistication. So that is the only theme that's available for instant web publishing, web design. The other themes are broken into two different types, however, which you should be aware of. I'll give an example of River, which is sort of like the one I use but has a border around it. But then you also have River Touch, and this is specifically designed to use with FileMaker Go. And it really is very, very beneficial to use the touch because the behaviors are different, and they also have much larger buttons that are more suitable to a tablet kind of a format. But though, unfortunately for web, again, for custom, you're doing your own design, but for instant web publishing, only the classic theme is available.
Great. The next question we have is, was this application and what we're seeing, is this a first round of development knowing that there is more development coming, or were you building off of a framework that already existed?
The only frameworks were really those scripts that I showed you. They were there were two things. Let me say, first of all, I had given the talk earlier in the year that was very involved with this column planning. And so this framed all of the thinking for the development because I was very familiar with this, having presented that webinar at the April FileMaker Academy. So that sort of was a mental framework, if you want to think of it that way. And then
I think the question is more geared, was this greenfield development for the client? Was this a brand new system for them, or were you building on an existing FileMaker solution?
I was building on an attempted FileMaker solution that they had gotten stuck on. So really, you'd have to say that this was green, originated.
Great. The next question we have, it just came in. If you can go back to your column planner and talk a little bit about the numbers and the grid alignment.
Yes, the trick of these columns is it's a little hard to see here, but these white columns are actually two smaller columns, and that ends up by being 6 pixels wide, or sorry, points wide. Now that we're using FileMaker 12, 36 points and 6, and so half of each of these white columns plus the pink and the half of this one makes up 48. And that becomes a column width that you can use in multiples of 48. Then what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to plan it. So for instance, if you look at the blue here, I'm going to plan it in essentially a 3-column design. And so it allows me to start at my data channel, which is in pink, and extend it to the end of my data channel for my left column. And so the different choices here are simply 2-column, 3-column of equal, 3-column with thinner on left and right, 2 wider columns with a thinner right column, or 1 column consistently across. So the key to setting this up, and this is covered in my earlier webinar, is to set up these columns on a 48-point grid, and you can do that by using your inspector and setting your grid size. Usually what you do is you set it to 72 points with 6 divisions, and that makes it easy to set this column dimension up. And I do provide information on our blog about accessing this whole column design concept. And as I say, there's the earlier FileMaker Academy, which is on YouTube, and also on the FileMaker Academy site that goes through this in great detail.
Thank you. And our last question is really not a question, it's more of a request from several listeners, and that is, would you be willing to do a presentation in the future on reusable code, showing how your navigation scripts are transplantable from system to system and how you grow them, and the other code you demonstrated that's reusable that helped you do things quickly?
Yes, I think that's a great topic. It's certainly, Tim, you know, this is a whole theme of mine. Having come from object-oriented programming initially, finding ways to reuse your code is enormously beneficial, and it often requires sort of seeing a big picture and saying, boy, if I know this, and if you go to DevCon, there are obviously a lot of sessions on that, and I'm a big fan of that because so often in FileMaker you can find yourself performing very repetitive functions. And remember, every time you create like 5 scripts when you could have had 1, then you got 5 things to maintain if the world changes. So it really is beneficial, and I would be certainly interested in pursuing this theme.
Great. And I just noticed one question that I missed earlier on, and I know I'm going to open a can of worms. We only have 3 minutes left in the presentation, so I may have to cut you off. But the question is I'm transitioning from Visual Fox Pro to FileMaker Pro. Any insight you can give? And for folks who don't know, in a former life, John was also a Visual Fox Pro developer, so that's why I'm worried about the can of worms. Go for it.
Okay, I'll be short. I think what you'll find is that the same power that's available, especially now that we got FileMaker 12, earlier on the object model that is available in Fox Pro was kind of limited in FileMaker, but with the addition of triggers and SQL queries and a number of other techniques that I did not get into today, I think that world has transitioned tremendously. And what you'll find is that your development time is about somewhere around 30% of what it would take you in Fox Pro. Simply a lot of things just come out of the back, emailing and web integration and importing and exporting without too much hassle, and a lot of the formatting work that you have to do manually in Fox Pro is done automatically in FileMaker. So I think what you'll find, first of all, you'll find that the data model will support pretty well anything you want to do, but certainly anything I've come across. And second of all, your development time will be reduced by about 70%.
Thank you. We had one last question roll in while you're answering that, since we have 30 seconds. Did you use the data separation model?
No, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but what we find is so often in data separation the schema is involved, and as soon as you have to affect the schema to affect your presentation level changes, then you got to change both files anyway. So I'm not against multi-file solutions at all, and there's a lot of benefits for doing it, but I'm not sure whether the traditional data separation model, I mean, we've used it many times, I'm not sure whether it has the payoff that we all hoped it would. However, having files that are separate for specialized purposes, such as an analytics database that points into a main system, there's a lot of ways you can use multi-file solutions to great benefit, but I'm not convinced that the traditional data separation model has as much payoff as everyone had hoped.
Thank you. So thanks again, John. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Ways you can get in contact with Keologic if you should have any questions about the presentation. Watch our blog for updated demo files. Please join us next month for our next presentation on You Do That with Excel. And if you have any other questions, do not be afraid to contact any of the FM Academy members, and we're here to help. And here's the contact information. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Tim.
The organizer has